Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Graham's Haunted Life. This is a new podcast I'm doing where I'm going to talk about horror, folklore, music, that kind of thing. Now, I'm going to start this episode with a little bit of an introduction, and then I'm going to talk about a couple of little topics, and then I'm going to finish off with something else that I've been doing, and I'll explain where to find that something else. So, firstly, I'm going to talk about a bit of horror. Recently, I've been in a folk horror kind of mood, and I watched a documentary that sort of delved into all aspects of folk horror. And a film popped up in that documentary that I'd never heard of, a film starring Jenny Agutter that was released in 1970 called I Start Counting. And so I watched that film, and it's become a favourite of mine. I watched it a couple of months ago, and I'm feeling like I want to watch it again already so soon. The kind of atmosphere in there was great, and the anguish of this young person going through such a difficult and tumultuous time, growing up and coming to terms with your feelings at the same time as this sort of murder mystery is unfolding in her locality. And I really enjoyed it. And like I say, I'm going to watch it again, and it's only been a couple of months since I did watch it. But I would highly recommend I Start Counting from 1970. If you're into folk horror, it kind of blends modernity for that time with like somebody sort of touching the past a little bit. Because her character is living in this new town project, but she keeps getting the bus out to this sort of common, and on the common is an old house that her family have links to, and she keeps going out there to this house, but this sort of area has been plagued by a few killings of young girls around that time, but she keeps going back to this old house of theirs that's kind of crumbling, and it's nice seeing her environment change from this awful generic looking new town to this crumbling old house that really, if it were done up, would be a beautiful place to live, looking so decrepit and clearly like haunted by her memories and haunted by the horrible things that are taking place at that particular time. And there's kind of a bit of it keeps you guessing as to who it might be that's committing these crimes. And all along she's sort of discovering her feelings, and she's growing up, as the story progresses. And I really enjoyed it. I would highly recommend it. And another thing I've been watching, or I have rewatched, I watched it when it came out on the BBC, Charlie Cooper's Myth Country. Now, I've been really enjoying that, and I've watched it again recently. There were 4 episodes, and it just feels so nostalgic. It feels like something I would have watched back in the 90s when I was a kid. It's really cozy, especially the episode where he delves into all of the sort of winter rituals and eventually ends up doing like a winter solstice sort of ritual with this Morris dancing group. But before that, he goes into I forget the name of the little town where they do the barrel burning thing, and it goes into a few different sort of things that people do around those colder months of the year, and I really love that. That's one of my sort of favourite aspects of folk horror. When you read or watch about what people do in order to get through the darker, colder months of the year when things can be quite bleak, the kind of rituals people go to make those times easier, to make it, worthwhile passing through those dark months. the big feast at the middle of winter and stuff like that. The things that became Christmas, I suppose, and bonfire night, all of these sort of traditions that go way back beyond Christianity. I really love that kind of thing, and I really enjoyed watching Charlie Cooper's Myth Country. And I quite enjoyed the show he did with his sister, where they go around ghost hunting in different places. That was quite good too. But Myth Country was just so cozy and nostalgic for me. I really enjoyed it, and I would highly recommend you checking that out on the BBC as well. We'll get into a bit of sort of literature. Recently, I've been reading War of the Worlds. I've had the book for ages, and I've enjoyed the musical version of War of the Worlds for years and years, the Jeff Wayne album. I've loved that album since I was a kid, but I've never read the book. So the last week or so, I've been reading the book, and I'm quite a slow reader, but I'm really, really enjoying it. I'm just getting up to the point now. I'm ready to start the chapter tonight where Thunderchild comes into play, which in the album is a giant warship. In the book, it could be different, but I wouldn't imagine so. I would imagine it is a warship. I'm ready to read that chapter tonight. But the sheer panic that was going on in the last chapter that I read had my palms sweating and my throat was dry as I was reading it. These people in this panicked state trying to evacuate London and head north, and they're just trampling over each other as they try and get all of their belongings out of London on little carts with horses and stuff, and families on foot dragging their tired children along, just frantically trying to get away from London. It really captured the sense of panic, made me feel it as I was reading it. So I've been really enjoying that book. That's kind of like sci-fi horror type of thing, and I really love a bit of sci-fi horror. Yeah, that's the book I've been reading recently, and I would like to know in the comments whether, if you're listening to this on YouTube, if you've read the book and you enjoyed it. I'd like to know what you thought. I'd like to know if you didn't enjoy it. I'd like to have these kind of conversations. Now I'll move on to a bit of music. The kind of stuff I've been listening to recently is kind of like late 60s, early 70s prog rock. Again, this is something I got into because of a documentary I watched a long time ago in 2008, I believe it was. The BBC did a series of shows that were like highlighting different music scenes from different eras in the UK. And one of them was prog rock. So this documentary, Prog Britannia, came on and showed me a whole heap of bands and this approach to music that I'd never heard of before, and I found it so interesting. So bands like King Crimson, Yes, early Genesis with Peter Gabriel, that kind of stuff. I discovered all of this music in about 2008 when I was 20, and it's always in rotation somewhere throughout my week. I like a lot of different music, but somewhere throughout the week, some prog rock stuff will come into play. Like recently, I managed to get myself a copy of In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson. I've been wanting a copy of that on vinyl for ages, and last weekend I picked one up, so I've been playing that all week, and that is an absolutely astounding album. The way that the band in sync play these rapid passages of music, really, really intricate music, so loud and aggressively, and then in the next breath, so quietly and gently, and just the approach of that band. I remember in the documentary, sort of other bands of the time commenting, saying it was terrifying to know that King Crimson were just around the corner and they were going to outdo you, because they were just musically on it. and that album is great. Now, another one of my favourite albums from that era is Close to the Edge by Yes. I think that is as close to perfection as you'll get for like a prog rock album that takes you into another headspace. It kind of draws me in every time I listen to it. The opening part of the album with all these sounds of nature and music and vocals start to creep in, and then the track fully builds and it goes on for, I'm sure that opening track's around about 15 or 20 minutes long or something, and just the whole album, which is only 3 tracks, but they're all really long tracks. The whole album just draws you in to another world for the duration, and you just feel like you've gone to another dimension just to have a bit of a rest. It's a really beautiful thing. And yes, at that time had the great Rick Wakeman in on sort of synths and keyboards and stuff, and their sound at that time was just so massive and expansive. It's an absolutely beautiful record. I mean, they did a handful of records that I really can't fault around that time, like Relay, and Rick Wakeman was gone for that one, but Relay is a really good album. Now I'm forgetting the name of the album before Close to the Edge. It'll come to me, but Close to the Edge is top of the pyramid for the Yes catalogue. It is beautiful. Yeah, and another band I mentioned earlier, Genesis, but the Peter Gabriel era of Genesis. Now, in that documentary, the guys in the band explained that they were like young public school boys who didn't have much experience with the opposite sex, so couldn't have confidently written love songs and stuff like that. So they just delved into the fantasy books that they were reading and the mythology that they'd been taught, like old Greek mythology and stuff like that. They delved into that kind of stuff for inspiration for their music, and it makes for like a good handful of albums of really interesting music. My favourite being Nursery Crime. That's a beautiful album. And like I said, they were like posh public school boys, and I'm normally drawn into like music made by sort of working class kids who are, they're using their skill to climb out of that working class pit. And prog rock, definitely from that era, was not a working class affair at all. But I really, really enjoy it. And that era of Genesis created some magical music. And there's a song called Return of the Giant Hogweed, which is the first Peter Gabriel era Genesis song that I heard. And from then on, I was done. Now, I knew of Genesis as the massive 80s pop sensation that they were, with Phil Collins at the helm. Didn't really know that there was an earlier era with a different singer. And it was just like this whole other world opened up. This song, Return of the Giant Hogweed, was this long, epic sort of tune about a Victorian explorer bringing a plant sample back from some mountain range in Russia and planting it in the royal gardens at Kew. And it vastly grows and overtakes the country, and this sort of song builds and builds, and it's about the struggle to fight off this invasive plant that's kind of choking off the nation. It's absolutely beautiful. So that's been the kind of thing I'm listening to recently. I'm very much into albums that have a bit of a concept and a theme running through them that take you to another place for a little while. That's where my head's at the minute. Now, next week, my head could be in a space where I want hardcore punk or death metal, or I've just got this massive, varied taste in music. I might want some folk music, that kind of thing. But since we're on the topic of music, I've been making music myself for about the last 7 months or something. I was gifted a synthesizer, and I started out creating some ambient tunes, And I've put like a few of those out there on Bandcamp. And again, if you're listening to this on YouTube, there'll be links in the description for a lot of the things I've talked about. I'll put links in there for my music. So I made this sort of ambient stuff. I then started bringing guitar into the mix, and my doom metal influences came into it, and I created some like ambient doom metal stuff, no drums or anything, just these riffs that move at a glacial pace and some vocals kind of buried in the mix to add a bit of like just a bit of a sorrowful tone to everything. And I made this little 5-track album called Violent Nature. Again, I'll link that in the description. And that will very soon be available on Spotify. I also have made a DIY physical run of that album, just a very limited physical run of it, that I'm going to take to some of my favourite record shops and see if they'll, take them off my hands and put them on the shelves with the obscure, noisy stuff. So that's been exciting. But I've started recording some more stuff, and I've come up with a concept. I've come up with a narrative, and I've written the story. I've written the story of this character growing up in the post-industrial era from the end of the 80s into the 90s. He has his childhood. He has his teenage era in the early 2000s, goes to college. He's just obsessed with music. He knows fine well that when he comes out of this technical college, there aren't going to be many opportunities for him. He's from a working class background. He's not going to go to university. He's going to end up on a production line in a dead-end job. He knows that because all of the industry in which he could have, climbed the ladder over the years, that industry and that structure is all gone by this point. And you just have production line jobs in factories for people of a certain sort of class. And he knows that's his fate. And he goes into it, and it becomes, in this little narrative, it becomes far worse than he even imagined. And the state become quite oppressive, and workers are really, really sort of knuckled down upon by the state. And the sort of ending of this album is this main character of ours and other groups of people all over the country organising a revolution. So yeah, I came up with this little concept, and it's probably because I've been listening to all of this prog rock stuff lately, but I'm gonna, record this over the next few months, and I'm really gonna take my time with it. Because when I recorded Violent Nature, I'm still really, really proud of how it turned out. But in reality, it's a demo, and it's like it was an experiment, and it proved that I could do this certain thing, and it has this very doom metal sound. And on this new album that I'm going to record, that doom metal sound will be there in points, but so will the ambient synth stuff, and so will some kind of post-punky sounds and post-punky style vocals. So I'm going to really take my time over the next few months, and I'm going to try to get it released by a record label rather than releasing it just by myself. But if that doesn't come off, I will just release it myself. But it's so exciting. After years and years of failing to get bands together and keep bands together, working out that I can just make my own music has been like revolutionary for me. The fact that I can now come up with a concept in my mind and get it out through an instrument into a microphone, put it all together, layer it up, and create a finished product. It's been amazing. Like, I can just be my own band. So, like I said earlier, any music I've already done, I will put links to in the description. And I will put links to other things that I've mentioned, other albums, films, TV shows. I'll put links in the description to all of that stuff. Um, the new album that I'm recording is called Whose Future? And it's kind of, as I said, Violent Nature was a very atmospheric doom metal kind of thing. This is much more of a kind of post-punk sort of dystopian nightmare kind of record, and I'm really going to take my time and get it right, and I think it's going to be really good when it comes out finished. I've recorded one track for it so far, so I've got about 6 tracks left to record, and it's going to take some time, but I'm really excited about that. And I'm going to wrap this episode up here because I feel like I've rambled a little bit there. So going forward, what I'll do with Graham's Haunted Life is I'll have a little bit of chat about some horror films and some horror books and stuff, what I've been reading and watching. And then I'll move on to chatting about a bit of music and stuff. And occasionally what I'll do is I'll talk about like real life paranormal cases, whether that is something that happened to me or a case that I've learned of that interests me. Gonna have a little chat about that kind of stuff as well. And I do write short horror stories, so I might add, like, if I've got a real short horror story that I've written, I may add one onto the end of an episode every now and again. So that's my intentions for this. That's Graham's Haunted Life in a nutshell. And I hope if you've listened to this first episode, you've enjoyed it. And I'll see you again sometime soon. Thank you so much for listening.